Oh, fish! During the debut of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexo Generation Force, we were treated to a handful of new toys to play with for the Dawn of Xyz monsters, and one of the interesting additions was Banish fish, or as some people call them, Generation fish. See, they aren't exactly a hard-boiled archetype of monsters, instead they're a group of cards that utilize the banishment as well as fish, aqua, and sea serpent type monsters. A way to introduce a brand new terminology of Banish, they seemed a little promising, but quickly became a bit of a joke, and since then have solidified themselves as a laughingstock. So yeah, those are the basics of these monsters. Though when some people talk about them, they'll often include cards like Big Jaw, Sea Lancer, and Submersible Carrier Arrow Shark. While those are definitely monsters that support the idea of banishing and fish, aqua, and sea serpent monsters, they're not a good fit thematically. Yes, I know you could play them all together and it would work well enough, but the point is that they're not really part of this pseudo-archetype. The main monsters that are the focus have a little more in common. Not only are they fish, aqua, and sea serpent, but they're also wind attribute and have a similar naming convention, combining a flying based word with an aquatic animal or attribute of that animal. Flyfang, Sky Star Ray, Air Orca, and Winged Tortoise make up the family. The first three monsters also have an ability that banishes themselves into your next standby phase in order to protect themselves and then use the ability again, whether that be piercing battle damage, attacking directly, or destroying cards on the field. Winged Tortoise can special summon itself when one of your fishy friends is banished. This is meant as a way to protect yourself and get more monsters on the field while you wait for the others to come back. Hypothetically, it sounds like a fun idea, and while the deck was experimented with to minimal success, it ran into a few problems conceptually. For one thing, the main monsters are relatively low power. Air Orca is the strongest, with it being able to remove some of the opponent's cards, and the effect cost is a great way to get more monsters in the banishment. But Flyfang and Sky Star Ray are purely attack-based effects that don't gain you much advantage. Winged Tortoise is a great way to maintain board presence, but doesn't do much without a banishing engine already in play. The other main thing is that the supporting spells and traps weren't that helpful. We have the amazingly named Fishing Kicks and Fishing Swaps, one that can serve as great removal as long as you have enough monsters banished, and the other allows you to get some of your dimensional fishies back to the hand. Underworld Egg Clutch and Fish Rain are trap cards that trigger when one of your monsters gets banished, allowing you to add a fish from your deck to your hand or special summon one from your hand. These are decent ways to keep monsters in your hand or on the field, but the problem is that they're trap cards. Because the monster effects only trigger on your turn, it would require you to have them set beforehand. It would have been better if Underworld Egg Clutch was like a continuous spell and Fish Rain was a quick play spell. And lastly, we have Oh Fish, one of the best card names in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! This is a counter trap that can negate and destroy an effect monster at the cost of shuffling one of your banished fish, aqua, or sea serpents back into the deck. And even though that one is actually a pretty powerful card, you can probably now see the issue. The normal trap cards are just too slow and honestly don't work thematically for a bunch of monsters that are supposed to be quick flying sea animals. The spells in Counter Trap are meant to use your banishment as a resource in order to activate some pretty powerful effects or get back some of those cards. They don't mix well with monsters that are supposed to return themselves to the field. If you activate Oh Fish, yeah, it's a great negate, but you're gonna lose one of your monsters that could come back the next turn. Fishing Kicks is some interesting removal, but requires a good amount of setup. With two of the monsters only being able to banish themselves during the battle phase, it becomes most usable in main phase 2. That's kinda why Air Orca works the best. I really do like Flyfang and Sky Star Ray because their effects fit them as monsters that are able to fly above or through your opponent's monsters, but they would have been better if they had effects that could work during main phase 1 while you're still setting everything up. There was also Spearfish Soldier, which is sort of an honorary member. Yeah, it is a wind attribute sea serpent that gains attack for your banished monsters, but it isn't a level 3 and it doesn't have wings, so it's more like generic support that's sometimes added in.
Good grief, he's naked!
Generation Fish did, however, have one of the best Xyz monsters as their boss. Leviair the Sea Dragon is a generic rank 3 that can special summon a level 4 or lower monster from your banishment. And what made it so great is that it's a generic monster, but with the wind attribute and naming convention, it was obviously meant to go with these guys. One of the things that saved Generation Fish in the very early days is that they released alongside the water attribute rank 3 fish engine. But looking back at Generation Fish, I honestly really like the idea, because we really don't see all that much like it. I love the idea of each monster just being some kind of flying sea animal. Flyfang specifically is just one of the coolest looking things ever. And I really love that it appears in the artwork of Oh Fish because that really just solidifies it as this funny iconic monster. With Fishing Kicks and Fishing Swaps, they're pretty generic spell cards, so I like that 7-colored fish is used in the artwork here. But back to the usual Generation Fish, it's actually really cool that most of them are green to go along with the wind attribute, and they've been able to stay so unique because we really haven't gotten too many more monsters with these same type and attribute combinations. Nowadays you might think that Goaty is a new incarnation of Banish Fish, but that isn't really the same thing. I think it would have been really cool if they doubled down and made Generation Fish an archetype in name that could receive dedicated support in the future. But I say that it isn't too late to go back and add even more. I'd even take some retrains of these guys with a new archetype name. So let me know what you think in the comments below about Generation Fish and if you thought it was cool back then or deserves another shot in the modern day. I for one am all for it. Heck, I'd even try to consider cooking with it in some kind of Time Wizard format. I even played with a few of them in one of my Playground Yugioh decks way back in the day to a decent amount of success. Though because most of them were rares and I was but a child, I never owned more than a few. I just sort of have that personal attachment to them and I want to see them get some kind of redemption. But for now, I guess we're just waiting for them to return back to the ground for another battle. Anyway, this is GatorX, thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you all later.